assume there won't be any corrections from the media based on this change in information from the UN.
Probably not, Dan. The reality is that the modern media is both lazy and incompetent. In this case, they're far worse than that. We all know that the first casualty of war is truth, especially when Hamas is involved, and this is a classic example of that. This is basically like a school teacher allowing their least trustworthy students to grade their own term papers. How many times can they fool you and continue to be fooled? It's really remarkable. And in the core issue here that you haven't yet mentioned is that Hamas cannot win this war militarily. They have to win it from a propaganda standpoint. And the best propaganda they have is to use civilians as human shields, as propaganda weapons, and the media has played right into that. And even President Biden has used these exact same numbers essentially to promote Hamas's view of what's happening and to try to destabilize Israel's response.
I think Cenk's been having a hard time even sitting next to me as I've been going through my monologue. So Cenk, go ahead. What do you make of my point and of John's point?
So I think you guys are leaving out the most critical point by a lot, Dan. The UN said, and that gentleman Khan said it in that press conference, the numbers aren't different. It's just that there's 10,000 people that have not been fully identified in terms of their first name, last names, whatever other information that they have. So the 24,000 have been confirmed as who they are individually. This is, you know, Ahmed, right. This is Mehmet, et cetera. There's another 10,000 that they haven't verified who they are.
But they've also reduced.
Hold on.
But what about the civilians? What about the women and children numbers that they're reducing now?
No, they're not reducing.
They are. They're by 50%.
No, they're saying this is the number that has been confirmed who their identity is. Mm-hmm. There's another 10,000 that are definitively dead, but we don't know fully their identity yet.
You trust them?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. Not because they're Hamas, not because they're Palestinian, but because not only what the UN says, but every other group, including a group that tracks this in the UK and the human rights groups, they say in every conflict, the Palestinian Health Ministry has had the most accurate numbers. If they didn't say that, the other human rights groups said, oh, no, it's Hamas numbers, it's nonsense, then I would say it's nonsense. And look, unfortunately, the side here that has had numbers not verified by anyone else and outrageous is Israel said 13,000 Hamas members killed.
Right.
And then like a week later, they came out and said, oh, 9,000.
But the media never cites the Israel numbers.
Right.
Right. It's like the Israel numbers are always taken with a huge grain of salt. But the Hamas, because the Gaza Health Ministry sounds so official. The Gaza Health Ministry.
No, Israeli Defense Forces, Israeli government
again, I don't hear anyone in the media citing the IDF numbers. But let me let John get in a response.
They've had a terrible track record, Dan. That's why.
Well, that's not why. That's not why. The reason that the IDF is not being cited is not because of any kind of track record. The idea that the IDF is less trustworthy than Hamas is absurd.
No, they're definitely less trustworthy than the Palestinian Health Ministry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to impugn them. The Palestinian Health Ministry, I apologize. Go ahead, John.
I like Cenk. I consider him a friend. I think he's being rather naive here. The reality is that Hamas is running the show here on the numbers. They were wrong. No one has ever accused the UN of being overtly pro-Israel. They're the ones doing the correcting here. I'm very much on Dan and Israel's side on this situation, and it's really an incredibly damning indictment of the American news media for going along with this.
And that's my bigger point here, is the American news media just accepting these numbers constantly. And look, and if, by the way, if this were happening with the IDF across the board, if every time I was turning on, they would say the IDF reports, I don't ever hear it, the IDF numbers, and I do have them. I do have the IDF numbers here, but I don't even cite them because, you know, it's true. They don't even seem to know for sure. You know, they say we assume approximately 8,000 fighters. It could be plus 1,000 is what they're saying. They're not putting in 16,323 the way that the Gaza Health Ministry does, you know, in making up numbers.
No, but Dan, they're not making up numbers.
They are. They estimate in buildings. They do. They estimate how many deaths.
That's a different number. There's 3 different numbers. There's the ones that are confirmed with their exact names and information. There's the 10,000.
That's the 24,000.
That's the 24,000. There's the 10,000 that are dead, but they're not fully.
No, they think maybe dead.
No, they are dead.
No.
And then, Dan, there's a third number of the 10,000 in the rubble that they don't know who they are at all. So the reality is the 34,000 is probably a conservative number.
Okay.
But Dan, overall, you're right about what you said in the beginning. It really, 34,000, 24,000, 44,000, either way, it is an onslaught. And Gaza is utterly destroyed.
But how many of them are fighters is very relevant as opposed to civilians.
I agree totally.
Okay, so let's agree on that. Yeah. So the numbers of how many are civilians really does matter.
Even in the 24,000, over half are women and children.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.